nice to see you. I hear you're in Edinburgh.
Yes, I am staying with Lenny Henry these next couple of days in his Purple Palace in Premier Inn. Did you worry where that was going, Catherine? Yeah,
I did.
I apologise for that. Yeah, I am in the Premier Inn in Edinburgh. I live in London, so yes, I'm far away from home. So fingers crossed the Wi-Fi holds out for us this evening. So
well, it seems to be okay right now. I presume you're visiting nurseries and preschools, are you?
Yes, I am. I've got a nursery group that I'm supporting. They've got settings in England and they've also got settings up here in Scotland. So yeah, I come up here every other month. So I've seen a couple of the nurseries today, and then one tomorrow before I fly home again. So yes, whistle stop tour. Yeah.
So we're talking about lining things up tonight.
I love it. I love it. It's a topic.
I actually quite enjoy lining things up.
Well, don't we all? Don't we all? It's quite frankly a topic that I can talk for hours and hours about. Okay. So thank you for inviting me to be here to talk to you about it today.
It's a pleasure. I want to start with a question though, because when I was putting this out there or making the question up, I've always, you know what I'm going to say. I've always called children first. So there'd be children with additional needs or children with special educational needs. But you insisted in it being autistic children. Can you explain why?
When we're talking about, yeah, you're right in terms of when we are talking generally about our children with additional needs. We don't say additional needs child. No. We say a child with additional needs, child with SEN. But when we are talking about those with an autism diagnosis, certainly from my links with certainly with the autistic community, links with and conversations with autistic adults, and conversations with my son too. He is autistic. He's not William with a side order of autism. It's part of his identity. Mm-hmm. So it's an autistic individual and an autistic child. It's part of who they are. It is their identity. So I'm very much, I am, although some would probably say questionable, but I am a neurotypical adult. And I always want to make sure that my work, I have my lived experiences with the neurodivergent community. As I said, and you put in the introduction, I am raising 2 neurodivergent children. But I very much want to make sure that my work is informed by the neurodivergent community, and autism and autistic individuals fall under that umbrella of neurodivergence. And the overwhelming, there are those individuals who prefer to have, identity first. Some prefer it, that they are somebody with autism. And it's about taking and kind of having regard for that. So the majority of the community are telling us they prefer identity first, but do check in with the person that you're talking to, because they might not want that, and that's okay. But certainly I take a lot of my work is informed by the community that I feel I'm here to support and offer guidance to. And the majority of people that I work with, I support, the families, the neurodivergent adults I've had conversations with, it is identity first.
It's interesting because, we organised the question and then it was passed to my team and I got a load of backlash for doing it the way you wanted it. Okay. So I went onto the Autistic Society website and read about it. Yeah. So I think it's right and I think it's correct. Yeah. But as you say, people are individual in the world, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just as us normal people are. So, so that was the first thing. So lining things up then. So, because I would say it's a scheme. Well, let me just give a little bit of background. I have worked with children with autism or autistic children in the past. I've done a lot of work with children with special educational needs, particularly with learning difficulties in that bracket. And this was years ago before I opened my nurseries. So this is over 35 years ago. And we would, in those days, disrupt those sorts of behaviours, which we wouldn't do. I wouldn't do now. I didn't actually feel very comfortable with it at the time, to be honest with you. But let's talk about lining things up. So why do autistic children line things up?
I love it when I walk into a setting or I'm speaking with somebody and it's that whole kind of, oh my gosh, they're lining things up, they must be autistic. It's that real kind of like, that's one of those things, you know, we kind of look for things, don't we? And we kind of think, right, eye contact. Okay.
Yeah.
Must be autistic. Don't give any eye contact. Prefer to play by themselves, must be autistic. You know, line things up in their play, must be autistic. And yes, there are certain common traits that we do see in our children, but just a child just lining things up does not equal an autism diagnosis. However,
it would be their scheme, wouldn't it? Be their schema. However,
either a schema or just their play preference, actually, not even linked to a schema. And we have to, for many children, and a lot of this is taken from again the community who have told us these things as they have, you know, grown up and are able to articulate maybe why they did things as youngsters. But it's that categorizing, it's that organizing, it's that element of play that has a sense of order, which very much fits with the autistic brain. The autistic brain seeking order, repetition, sequence, organization, control as well over what is happening for them. So all of those things for many of our children, it offers them safety in the familiar. It offers them routine and structure in this kind of repetitive play. And for many, it kind of restores order when things are feeling maybe a little bit out of control. And one of the things that I've heard from autistic adults is that it offers that element of regulation, because what it does by really hyper focusing on that order and that sequence actually can reduce the noise. And I'm not talking about
because they're concentrating.
I'm not talking about necessarily the kind of actual noise, but I was talking to a neurodivergent adult member of staff at nursery today, and he said to me today, he said, imagine you've got your laptop open and you've got 1,000 tabs all playing a different YouTube clip. It's that's constant. So what it does is it reduces that noise and supports that calmness.
It's like blocking it out.
Absolutely. So yes, it can be part of a schema, but it can also be that need and that preference for predictability, for order. But what I would also say, kind of flipping it back into what you said about you would stop that behavior. Why do children play? Children play because they practice stuff, but also because it's fun, because it brings joy, because it excites them, because it's something they are super interested in, and they want to.
The non-autistic child, if we can call it that,
the neurotypical child,
neurotypical child. Thank you. Yeah. Would also practice things over and over and over again until they've had enough of it.
But because
sorry, Cheryl. So for a child lining things up, does that mean that they're going to line things up forever then? Are they still lining things up as adults?
No. I have this to me all the time. Because my son's now 17. He was diagnosed autistic when he was 6. And I've had people say to me in the past, oh, is he cured now? Because he doesn't do what he did when he was younger. He doesn't play like he did when he was younger. He doesn't have the meltdowns that he had when he was younger. He isn't, he doesn't behave like he did when he was younger. Did you behave like you did when you were 3? No, of course you didn't. Of course you don't, because you have developed your skills. You have progressed. You have learned new ways of doing things. He still has meltdowns, and trust me, at 6'1", that they come on strong, and they're big ones, and you know about it. But he's not going to throw himself
17-year-old doesn't.
Well, he's not going to throw himself on the floor in Tesco's anymore like he used to, because he has learned strategies for when he's feeling that overwhelm. So going back to play, all children play, like you say, to practice things for joy, for excitement, because they just want to do it. Why are we not affording our neurodivergent children the same level of respect as an individual and acceptance for difference? And that's what I very much push and promote neurodiversity affirming practice. And that is all about a strength-based approach, a strength-based narrative, validating and accepting our children's neurotype as okay. It's different.
Doesn't it make life much easier if you do? Because it's not a continual battle of wills, is it?
Because you also make things better for them, because in your acceptance, in your validation and your understanding, what it means is that you are providing a safe space for those children. If our children are in a safe space, they will not feel anxiety, they will not feel stress, they will not feel overwhelm. And it's those things that trigger the behavior that you're seeing. Autism is not a behavioral disorder. The behaviors that we see in our children are because of them reacting to the environments and the situation that they are in. So if our children are in safe environments, they will not have that high level of anxiety that triggers the behavior. So yes, it will make your life easier. Trust me. It's a journey. I mean, and I hate that whole kind of X factor term. It's a journey that we go through, and I'm working with settings and working with them as a consultant over a regular basis, because it's about embedding this new approach, things that we've learned how to do and how things should be, and how children should be meeting these expectations and should all sit down on the carpet for story time and should follow this rule. And we need to shift our thinking. We need to support our children with connection and trust and belonging over compliance.
I was brought when I did my NNEB training, I did it in the era of the Warnock Report. Mm-hmm. You probably won't remember, or it may not have even heard of it. It was a big thing at the time, and it was a shift from labelling children to labelling their needs, and that's why I never felt very comfortable about. I went and did an advanced. I went on to do the advanced NNEB, and so it was all part of that course, in fact, about disrupting moving children on, particularly, and that was a big shift. And then I think there's been a big shift, probably over the last 15 years or so, away from that, where children have to have a diagnosis. So you have to label them, and you have to in order mainly to get funding, to get the right paperwork, etc. But for me, my pedagogy is very much around what each individual child needs, and I can see that you probably have quite a challenge to get people to see things in a different way. Do you? when you go and see different settings.
Yeah.
And parents, I would imagine parents of other children as well probably come into that remit.
There's still a lot of stigma. There is, I mean, the whole parenting journey is a whole different ball game. You've got parents of neurotypical children who are potentially getting the kind of backlash from a child who is dysregulated and are questioning, why is this child in the setting and what are you doing to prevent that behaviour? But then you've also got parents who are at different stages of their journey in their acceptance and understanding of their child's neurotype. And, you know, that can create challenges for staff, because we know,
that's what I was thinking.
We know that in order, we you know, the research tells us that early identification, the earlier the support can come in, the better the future life chances and outcomes.
Yes.
But if you've got a parent that's not ready yet to have that discussion, but I'm very much like you. We still, regardless of whether a child, I mean, to be frank, there aren't many children in early years that will get their diagnosis while they're with us in early years, because the waiting lists are so long. The criteria has changed in terms of EHCP thresholds, because local authorities have limited budgets these days. So we have to support the child in front of us. So I hear it a lot. I wrote something a little while ago about, you know, we can't do anything to support the child because the parent's in denial. Well, firstly, that's a narrative that we need to stop, because we're not in denial. I knew my son was autistic when he was 2 years old. I just wasn't prepared, able, ready to say it out loud yet, because I knew what was going to happen. And I knew that my son wasn't going to be accepted by the world. And I had to figure it out myself before I could say it out loud to other people. But regardless of whether a child has a diagnosis, parents aren't yet willing, able to have that conversation with you yet, or whether or not a child is on the pathway to a diagnosis, there is still so much we can do to support that child in front of us and their unique needs. And I talk lots about people shifting from an equality lens and equal opportunities to equity, and then viewing our children through an equity lens and seeing that whole child in front of us, and ensuring we are meeting their unique needs. Because as well, we will also have children that come to us already with that confirmation of that different neurotype, autism, ADHD, PDA, whatever it might be. But just because we have cared for, looked after, had a child in our preschool before 18 months ago who was autistic, you've not had this child who's autistic, and they will present very, very differently. So it's about making sure that we are understanding that child right in front of us. And there are so many things that we can do to support that child without funding, without a diagnosis. And we need to see and think about, use the tools that we've got around us. You know, every local authority now is pulling together an ordinarily available provision document that will help you to look at what provision can you provide without the need for funding or additional support. Because also we know that support is quite often now a little bit sparse, because again, local authorities don't have enough people and money.
But that's why it's really important for early years to be a profession in its own right and have the respect that we can actually do an awful lot for these children. I have a story that I want to share, but carry on. I don't want to stop you on your track.
No, and I think just on that really as well, it's the training that we provide our early years staff around all of this. You know, I've been doing this specifically now with my company for about 2.5 years, and I get to a point where I think, surely everyone's heard me now. Surely I've spoken. Surely everybody knows this stuff, and I'm still surprised when I turn up to a keynote and I've got 200 people in front of me, and people come over to me at the end and going, "This is a revelation. I've just had a massive light bulb moment," and they're crying because they feel they've done a disservice to the children, and because they haven't been taught this stuff. Neurodiversity affirming practice, sensory differences, the behaviours that we see because of those sensory differences, how to support our children in those moments of meltdown, how to support transitions, what inclusion really looks like, meeting children in their play. So the training and the support out there for the staff to ensure that they are doing the best that they can, but they don't know what they don't know, right?
No,
And,
that's right.
and until they know more,
if we put the children's needs first, and I want to just go. I just want to tell you my story. Our software is very much geared to the individual child. Right, every child is unique in the early years, but in fact, we had the software well before there was even a framework out there, and it's very much linked to child development. Anyway, in one of my nurseries, we had a little girl, baby, 6 months old she was, and the staff recognised. I'm going goosebumpy, and it was years ago. She's now in her mid to late 20s. She loves jigsaws, by the way. I watch her on Facebook, and but at 6 months old, the staff identified that she wasn't meeting a certain milestone. And in this case, it was jabbering. She wasn't jabbering. She was making weird noises. That's how they described it. And because that was recognized, we recognized there was an issue. We did manage to get this. I mean, this was years ago. We did manage to get in somebody who they wouldn't normally come in because she was so young. You know, they wouldn't come in until a child was probably 3 or 4. But we gave, you know, we because we identified it so early. She is autistic, and she ended up in a special school for autistic children, as it happens. And she's done very well. But it was identifying things very early and meeting that child's needs. I've got a fan heater going on now. Excuse me a minute. Turn that on. Turn it up, not off. And it was about meeting her needs and her family's needs. We had the older sister in the nursery as well, so we knew the family very well anyway. And we were very lucky. It was an easy journey with the family. They were quite accepting and very supportive, and vice versa. I mean, we used to take, she wouldn't eat at home, for example. So we used to literally take the nursery dinners with the nursery crockery and the nursery cutlery and the nursery tablecloth. And I can remember our Senko, Claire, she literally, even in the flood, we had a flood, even in the flood, she took all of this stuff round to this child's house to do it in exactly the same way in her home environment as she would have in the nursery environment, because she would eat at nursery, you know? And I hadn't actually, I'd forgotten all about it until we started talking, Cheryl.
That's right. That's a really lovely story. And it does make a massive difference when there is that joint understanding, that almost that kind of joint journey that the parent and the setting go on together. But just to kind of come back to you around that whole kind of milestones, meeting expectations and meeting need. I kind of go against the grain a little bit, so it might.
I know what you're going to say.
I love your kind of thing, a spark debate. I kind of feel it is going to spark a debate. I saw something that an autistic adult popped up, and she works in education, popped up on her social media the other day, and it's something that I've been talking about for a long, long time. So milestones and kind of, you know, whether it's child development, whether it's EYFS, whatever it is, those milestones have been set, and they're an average.
Absolutely.
They're an average of what we would expect from the children that maybe are not yet there, never will be, and those that exceed that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've done is, if a child now doesn't meet that average, it's like we've wiped them out from the whole process of finding what the average is in the first place. And for some of our children, they are never going to reach those milestones. Or those milestones are going to look different for our children. But what we've done is place different with a problem, difference with a deficit, difference with, oh my gosh, we need to cure and fix that child so they're more neurotypical. That is what has to stop, because that then is the compliance-based route, and it pushes burnout, it pushes masking, it pushes our children to have barriers to education as we go further into school.
Yeah.
So we need to see that the way that our children play, the way that our children behave, the way that our children communicate is different. And that's okay. We need to support our children with problem solving, self-regulation, independence, and having a voice. Everything else.
In today's world, in today's world, in comparison to 5 years ago, everything is different. Nothing in the world stands still.
No.
And actually, there's quite a lot of acceptance now for things that are different. I know there's a lot of backlash as well, whether you're a he, she, or they. But there is a lot of difference in the world in comparison to what there was. And I think there's much more acceptance now, though you say, you think everybody knows this, what have you. I do think there's more of society that accepts difference than there used to be.
However, we still have an education system that is born out of behaviour modification systems and compliance. And
we have an education system that actually isn't fit for society, really. Whoever you are,
not fit for our children. That's why we have so many children that are not in school, and the whole term school refuser. They're not a school refuser. Our children want to be in school, but our children are faced with barriers to education, and those barriers are being placed by the system. And that's why we have so many teachers, good teachers, leaving, because they cannot support the children effectively because of the barriers that are placed in front of them, not for want of trying or want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And then you have got parents like me who are having to fight every single term to get the support that your children need, just to get to school sometimes, just to get through the day. But again, just going back to child development and those expectations and those milestones. I was in a setting, this was a couple of years back now, and there was a little boy who was in the preschool who was autistic and pre-verbal. And one of his targets was to make and maintain friendships, because that's what it said in the EYFS. That was the next step in the EYFS. So that's what the setting we're using. So again, we don't know what we don't know. We're kind of guided by these tools that, quite frankly, are not fit for purpose, but we are guided by these tools. So that's what we're using, because we're not given our sector the training to kind of understand what that might look like for a different child. That's what we go with. So I was chatting to the member of staff and kind of guiding her through why I think there might be a challenge with that for this child, and why we might want to have a look at it and look at something different. And I said to her, look, if that target was placed on my son when he was 3 in nursery, can I tell you how long he would have had that target for? Or could you, maybe have a guess? What do you think? And she said, oh, I don't know, 6 months, a year. I said 10 years. I said, my son started to make and then maintain friendships when he took his GCSE options at school and found his people in the subjects
they
that
like the same things.
He found his people. So therefore, he started to make and maintain friendships. Up until 13, he would not have reached that goal. So just because it tells us that in child development, or it tells us that in Development Matters or Birth to 5, have a think about whether or not that goal and that target is going to be a suitable target for that child. Or actually, is it about understanding where that child is right now?
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same. I mean, if you've got a child who can't walk, you wouldn't ask them to, you wouldn't have a target to jump, would you? If you see what I mean?
Nope. And I said exactly the same thing to my son's teacher. So we went in, my husband and I went in and had a conversation. It was the head teacher and his class teacher. My youngest son is dyslexic. And they, in year 3, and many people have still traumatized by it, in year 3 in this country, many schools have something called a pen license. Now, when you reach year 3, you have to prove that you can write properly in cursive writing in order to upgrade your pencil to a pen. And you get a certificate to say that you can now write, and you get your pen license. And my son's dyslexic, so his letters are back to front, upside down. Words aren't spelt correctly, so the words don't flow when you're writing it in cursive because they're spelt phonetically, and phonetically they're not flowing. So we had a conversation about pen licenses, and we said, because we said, look, it's a very clear and visual representation of the children who can and the children who can't in a classroom. So my son, whose self-esteem is at rock bottom anyway, because he feels that he's stupid and he's rubbish and he's thick.
For any child, it's
right.
poor
He's not
confidence.
He's not potentially ever going to get his pen license to write properly. And it was actually my husband who, you also know, we actually said to them, if you had a child in your class who was a wheelchair user, and in order to do PE, that child had to get their trainer license. And in order to get a trainer license, they needed to run a lap of the track in the field. Would you do that? And they sort of laughed and said, well, no, we wouldn't. Then why is it okay to have pen licenses for a child who that child is never going to achieve that? How is that right? And how is that an inclusive approach to trying to get those children motivated enough to do it properly and well enough? And actually they took on board what we said, and the school no longer has pen licenses, so we scrapped that one. So that was good. That's good. But it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing where we're not thinking. We're not thinking.
It's also, I mean, I had another little boy. Well, he wasn't so little. He was 14. I worked in a school for behavioural and language difficulties. Okay, one of the many schools I worked in, he wasn't very communicative at all, but he could do long division in his head. It's a lot of children who have autism and dyslexia, actually, in my experience, have particular talents that go far beyond the norm when we're talking about child development. And we've got something to celebrate there, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. So my son still has to be, because of his sensory differences, he also has sensory processing differences, as many of our neurodivergent children have. He still needs to be reminded at 17 to brush his teeth, to have a drink, because he has challenges with interoception, which is the messages that come from the internal organs to the brain that tell us whether or not we're hungry, thirsty, full up, whether we need the toilet, if we're hot or we're cold. So he doesn't sense and doesn't feel thirst. So he has to be reminded to drink. When he was younger, he had to be stopped eating because he would eat and eat and eat and eat and eat until he was sick, because his body wouldn't tell him he was full up. However, last week, given the A levels he's currently doing, he recited every single American president in order, because that's his special interest. He is hyper-focused on American history, loves all of that stuff. We've been through so many special interests over the years. We've had the Cold War, we've had Star Wars, we've had all sorts of stuff. But they will have those special interests, those hyper-focused interests. And we have to celebrate those things. That's
exactly the same as a toddler or an older child lining things up, isn't it?
Yeah,
there's an interest there that they need to follow through with.
Absolutely. And just going back to that quickly in terms of sequence and order, people often, they're lining up their cars. They must be interested in cars. So I then go into a nursery and there are cars everywhere. Cars in the tough tray, cars in the sand tray, cars outside, trucks here. Have you actually looked to see what it is about the cars that they have an interest in? Because I've worked with a little boy in the past who, yes, would line up cars. But when you truly know that child, when you truly observe that child, when you truly connect and provide that child with the space to be able to tell you who they are, what they're interested in, whether that's verbally or non-verbally. Yes, this little boy was interested in cars, but it wasn't just red cars or cars generally. They were Formula One cars. And what he was doing was lining them up in order of what happened on the track at the Formula One race at the weekend.
Wow.
So actually, it wasn't cars per se. So you couldn't chuck a Ford or a Mustang in there, because that you wouldn't find one of them on the Formula One starter grid. So it was Formula One. And so again, he was able to recite the order that they came in, that they passed the checkered flag, like my son was able to, give over the American presidents. So we have to understand their unique needs, but we also have to give them time and our time to get to know who they are and what they are interested in and what that means for them and what that looks like for them. Because they do like, as I often put up a slide when I'm doing sort of training or keynotes of both my children. We do life differently, and different is okay. And we need to get to that point of acceptance. So we stop trying to get our children to comply with the rules and expectations. Yes. And people kind of say to me, oh, Cheryl, what you're saying means that the children can do what they want when they want. No.
I personally take the view that all children, we should be doing this for all children, not just autistic children. I think this is where the uniqueness comes in. Every child is different. And okay, yes, I am child development is quite important to me in many ways. One, because it is diagnostic. And two, because sometimes we do have to give children the opportunities. And if we don't understand child development, we could be giving children opportunities well before they're ready. So they sort of jump through the hoops, as it were, just to please us adults and miss out a lot of learning to get to do that. And that impacts on their future learning. But respecting children, they don't holistically all do the same. They don't literally, it's not linear, it's holistic. And I think we should be treating all children like this. And I'll tell you another story. We had a little boy with Fragile X. He was a very big child. And we he was funded by social care, I believe. Anyway, we put him in with the toddlers because that was his developmental age. Okay, rightly or wrongly. Okay, we can have a debate about that, but rightly or wrongly, that's what we did. And on his play plans, because we used to have play plans for children with additional needs, on his play plan, it was to get him to say yes or no rather than kick the bowl across the room or whatever he did. And then suddenly we realised that we weren't actually asking any of the other children to do it. You know? So we would, you know, they'd pass the fruit round or they'd pass the biscuits round or whatever it was at snack time, and they would take the one they wanted. Well, but it brought what the point I'm trying to make is it enriched our practice by considering this child's personal needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, again, I'm going goosebumpy. And I think that, you know, accepting these children can be a very enriching experience for everybody. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And it's about affording all of our children the same opportunity to feel safe and thrive. But it's understanding that thriving will look different for each child. And we have to understand how we support those children. And for all of our children, I talk lots about trust, connection, and belonging. That's a human need.
Yeah.
We all need to feel trust. We all need to feel trusted. We all need to feel a sense of belonging. But we can only have that sense of belonging if we're able to be and feel safe enough to be our true, authentic self. But if we are in a setting where we are being told, where our children are being told, not straight to their faces, but they are being told that the way that they play is wrong. They are being told that the way they behave is wrong. They are being told that the way they communicate is wrong. Our children quickly learn, this isn't a place for me. I can't be me here. Therefore, I do not have this sense of belonging. So what do I need to do to just get by and just get through and do what I need to do so I don't get into trouble? And so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to mask and I'm going to pretend to be somebody else whilst I'm here. But then what we find is, well, masking, if you talk to any neurodivergent adult, the impact of masking is massive on mental health and well-being. And I have seen children as young as 2-3 masking, especially in our girls in their early years. And then what happens is, I've had it with both of my children. They get home from school, because that tended to be where they masked the most, and we call it the Coke bottle effect. They explode because they're now in their safe space where they've been, if you imagine that bottle of Coke that's been shaken up all day, contained in this bottle, this stress has been contained. They're now in their safe space where they can just go, oh, and the lid comes off, and the parents are getting it full whack, and that's because they're having to hide who they are day in and day out in the place where they are.
And I think many children do that as well when they come home. You know, many normal. What do I say now? Neurotypical. Thank you. Many neurotypical children come out of school and explode because they've been contained in an environment that isn't actually perhaps right for their needs, as well. I think. Yeah. I was going to say something else actually. I was going to talk about staff. I mean, when I was 14, I was sent to do voluntary work in a mentally and physically handicapped hospital. That was what it was called. Okay. And they were adolescents and adults, and it was really, really scary. I found it incredibly scary, and I didn't know what I wanted to do for my career, for a career at that point in time. And I still do. I had a second cousin who was a matron in a hospital, and she suggested that I went down to Great Ormond Street to do an SEN qualification, and there was no way I could do that. But why I'm bringing this up is that when people don't know, when people don't understand, and when people are scared of something that they don't understand, then it's very easy to go into autopilot and treat children in a way that is going to help them cope with it. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the unknown. And again, because it's a hidden disability, we can't see it. And we can't see it, so we don't know how to support, because, you know, a wheelchair user, right, yeah, okay, we get that, we can see it. Child comes to you and has epilepsy, right, yep, I understand that. Seizures, this is what they look like. Medication plan, medication in the, you know, in the office, stored away. Yep, we do it, got some training around it. Yeah, fine. EpiPen, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. And amputee, yeah, okay, we get that, we can provide the accommodations for that, we can see that. Neurodivergence, can't see it. So because,
and it's also very different. One child will be incredibly different to another.
Absolutely. You know, you might have a child, you might have an individual who will be pre-verbal or minimally speaking their entire life, will not be able to live independently, will need support, long-term support, to be able to, wouldn't be able to go to mainstream school, may not necessarily gain employment, and will need support their entire life. My son, 17, now sitting his A-levels, has had a driving lesson, trying to get a part-time job, talking about university. They have the same diagnosis. They have the same autistic diagnosis, but they are very, very different people with very, very different needs. But it's something that, because we don't see it, we can't understand it. And then we get the narrative, oh, well, everyone's autistic these days. Everyone's a little bit autistic though, aren't they? No, we're not. Autism traits are human traits, yes, but it's how those traits impact our day-to-day life compared to our peers, which means that those needs need support and will require
tuning in. I'm thinking,
but it's about, for me, it's a equity lens, a neurodiversity affirming lens. So seeing our children through a strength-based perspective, understanding their unique identity, understanding their human rights for education, their right to play. And it's not their right to play as long as it's neurotypical and it makes us feel better because it's the neurotypical way of playing. It's play their way. And every child has the right to an identity, and their neurotype is part of their identity. It's as simple as that.
Yes, absolutely. For all children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's super.
It's about trying not to put all of our children in a box.
Well, I mean, our education system does that, doesn't it?
I'm here to say there is no box. Forget the box, get rid of the box, and just see our children for the beautiful, wonderful, unique, intelligent, capable, competent individuals that they are.
I could say another story about it. I will. I mean, when my children, how do I say it? Neurotypical. I think I've got verbal dyslexia, by the way. Neurotypical, if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
Neurotypical children, my neurotypical children, were trying to decide what to do for their GCSEs and their O-levels. A-levels, didn't do GCSEs, but anyway. And I was advised as a parent to let them choose what they felt they were good at. And I really believe that's the way to go with children. You know, they should be allowed to do what they're good at, because we're all good at something. Okay, we might not be number smart, we might not be letter smart, but we might be sports smart, or people smart, or nature smart. You know, we're all good at something, but our education system doesn't recognise that. And the same thing happened when they went to university. They chose what they wanted to do, what they were good at, what they wanted to do, rather than doing something. I do have an issue with that, because I think it's not. I personally think that people should do a degree that's going to get them a good job, and then they can go and do their degree in something peculiar. But I let my children, you know, I didn't influence them at all. I encouraged them to do what they wanted to do, what they felt they were good at. And I think that's the same with these children, really.
Oh, absolutely. My son is, you know, he's now doing his A-levels in 3 subjects that he is super passionate about: history, politics, and film.
Wow.
And he is flying. He now leaves for school 20 minutes earlier than he has to get there on time, because he wants to be there early, because he's loving being at school. Now, as I said to you before we came on, he is a child who, after COVID, according to him, I was sending him back to school to die, and he wasn't ever going to go back again. And he hated it, because he was having to do RE and PE and French, and they made no sense to him. I mean, it didn't help that, you know, he wasn't interested in English either, but he had to do that. And that was one thing we kind of, you know, you've got to get that, dude, unfortunately. Then the world's your oyster. And because he's done that, he's now flying.
Yeah,
so, but again, you know, but my youngest, he's a doer. He's a practical. You know, the kind of academia side of it, he really, really struggles with. Yeah. But he's an out of the box thinker. He is a problem solver. He is a creator. He is a doer. He is the outside one. And our world needs all of those people. And he will be an amazing individual. He will be an entrepreneur. He will probably make more money than any of us combined, because he's got the charm, he's got the wit, and he will succeed. But our world needs people.
I wonder what
do things differently.
What Mr. Musk's childhood was like, and what his schooling was like.
I don't know.
He's supposed to be autistic, isn't he?
He is, but I think the less said about Elon Musk these days, the better, quite frankly.
I agree on that front. That's why I said Mr.
Yeah, I think he said it. I think he does identify as autistic. So yeah.
Wow, we've done very well, Cheryl.
Yeah, we've kept going
to ourselves. And the chat obviously is people listening to us are obviously spellbound by you, because nobody said anything.
Oh.
And I haven't actually asked them to either.
In complete silence.
Well, thank you very much. There will be a recording of this, and it will be on YouTube, and we will send it to everybody that signed up, whether they've been able to attend or not this evening. And I'm sure both of us are quite happy for people to reach out to us for various reasons. Not that you know a great deal about me yet, really. Right, I'm going to do the exit video. Thank you very much, Cheryl. I hope tomorrow goes all well.
Thank you for having me. Nice to speak to you.